Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to this short presentation relating to revision for the English functional skills test that you're due to be sitting soon. My name is Paul Barber, functional skills tutor for Serco. I'm going to run through the key areas for the two English tests, those being the reading test and the writing test. So the first one we're going to look at is the reading test. By now you should have completed a practice test, so you will have seen the practice test system, but I'm going to show you it anyway. So this testing system is exactly the same as the software that you'll be completing your real test in. When you start the test, you'll be given a scenario, as you've got at the top there, and you'll be given 3 documents to read. And all you can simply do is click that document number, and the document will appear on the screen, and you can scroll up or down to read it. And the same with number 2 and number 3. When you go on to any questions, if I click next to go on to the first question, you'll see this question is about document 1. And I don't need to remember everything from document 1 because I can open it again by simply clicking the number. That's obviously in the way of the question, so I can click and drag the red bar at the top and I can move it around just so I can read the question and read the document at the same time. One thing you can't do, unfortunately, is you can't copy and paste information from the document. So if you did want to quote directly from the document, which is a good idea, you would need to leave it on the screen or close it off and type in like this. So a band manager, and so on and so on. So we can type that. With all the tests, you work through to the last question. You can go forwards and backwards through the questions by clicking the numbers wherever you want. And then when you finish, you'll click finish at the top and it will give you an option to check that you have actually finished the test. But as I say, hopefully you've seen that screen already. So in terms of the reading test, you'll be given 3 related texts or documents that I've mentioned. You'll be given 1 hour and 10 minutes to complete the test. There is the chance at the start to read all the text, but they are available throughout, as I've just shown you. There will be 12 questions and a total of 40 marks. To pass for reading tests, you usually have to get around 70%. We're looking at about 28 marks out of 40. There will be questions where you're required to compare and contrast between the texts, so that's important to look out for. You can bring a dictionary to the test if you'd like to and look through, although you won't be asked to define any specific words. So you shouldn't have to look up the meaning of a word unless you're unsure of it yourself as you're reading. It isn't the kind of test where they say, what does such and such a word mean? And one thing to bear in mind is there's no marks for your spelling, punctuation, or grammar in your answers. As long as they're legible and the marker can work out what they are, if you're not sure how to spell something, as long as you make a best guess, that's fine. Obviously, you can amend if you need be, but don't spend ages worrying about your spelling, punctuation, and grammar in your answer because it's not marked. So the kind of questions you will get on the test, you will get questions about the texts, the documents, and what is the purpose of them? Why were they written? You'll be asked questions about who is the intended audience, who are the documents aimed at. You'll be asked about language types, and for this you're looking at things like informal or formal language, maybe persuasive, descriptive, emotive language. One of the more technical areas is when you're asked about what language styles or techniques are used. And some of the words that you may use here to describe the styles and techniques are metaphors, similes, hyperbole, alliteration, rhetorical questions, cliches, and bias. Any of those could come up in the test and maybe things that you'll refer to. So if you're not sure any of those, then it's worth doing some further revision on them. You may be asked to identify facts versus opinion. Facts are usually things that can be tested and checked. Opinion obviously is someone's viewpoint that they're getting over. And you will also be asked about layout or visual features of a text. And if it asks you about the layout or the visual features, it literally means how does the document look? So what fonts do they use? What size of text? Is there anything in bold or underlined? Are there headings, columns, bullet points making it easier to read? Are the pictures in colour in there? Are there links to other documents? So if you get a question about visual features or layout, it does mean exactly what it says. What does it look like? For all functional skills tests, the awarding organisations produce an examiner's report, which basically indicates what the markers are looking for and what do they say are the key things that people need to be aware of. And these are the latest. This is the latest report from the level 2 reading test. And the things that are suggested from the key examiners are that people consider time management. An hour and 10 minutes isn't the most generous amount of time for this once you've read the documents. Obviously, you'll keep looking at them forwards and backwards. So it's important to try and get through all of the questions. If there's any other questions you're unsure of, you can go back to them if there's time at the end. But you are better to try and get through all of the questions before you go back and try and make amendments. Sounds obvious, but consider what is being asked. So if the question asks you to list something from the text, a list suggests it's just a list. However, if it asks you to describe something from the text, then obviously you're looking for a lot more detail in terms of the description. With that goes the sufficient responses. And one of the key things you can do in the reading test is to look at the marks available. If it says list 3 things and there are 3 marks available, then there's going to be 1 mark for each of the 3 things that you list. Pretty obvious. If it says describe what the writer is trying to get across in this section of the text, and maybe there's 2 marks for it, you're going to have probably 1 mark for explaining what the marker is trying to describe, and then maybe another mark for evidence of that and details and evidence from the test. So look at the marks available for every question. If it's a 1 mark question, 2 mark question, it probably is quite a quick answer. Or if it's a list, if it's more marks than that, you obviously need to consider, have you put enough information for it? Similar kind of thing is, have they asked for an example or an explanation? If the test question asks for an example, it wants, as it says, something from the text that's an example. If it wants an explanation, it wants you to consider what they've said there and put that into your own words. It is always a good idea, in the questions for the reading test, is to quote from the text, particularly if the question asks you for, as I put there, examples or evidence. So if you can directly quote from the text, as I said, unfortunately you can't copy and paste. If you can directly quote from the text, that's very useful in your reading answers. There will be questions that ask you to compare and contrast 2 texts. So it might say, look at the opinions of the writer in document 1 and document 3, and how do their opinions differ? What happens a lot of the time is people will put, in document 1, the writer thinks X, in document 2, the writer thinks Y. So that's laying out what the 2 documents do, but they don't necessarily then go on to compare and contrast. So after those 2 sentences, you might put another sentence saying, as you can tell, the 2 writers differ because one believes in the positive aspects and one believes in the negative aspects. But something that you're comparing and contrasting the 2 is quite a key area that people lose out on. And the other thing that the chief examiners say is that they want responses from the text. All the answers that you need should be contained within the text in some way. So they're not asking you to draw on your own experiences or imagine things that are around the situation. They want you to use the information from the text. So sometimes people try and use answers that they think might be right based on their own experience. If it's not related to the text, then that's not the answer.